Opening credits. Double Pawsome. Tiger Shifter Ménage Romance. By Selena Coffey. Auto-narrated, using Google technology. Prologue. Is it possible to love more than one man? I didn't know, but as Dominic wrapped his arms around my waist and entered me gently from behind, not only did my body welcome him, but also my heart. And as I moaned his name, he
censored
my neck, all while trailing a path of pleasure down my spine with his warm, calloused hands. I didn't know about love, but I knew about
censored.
And I was in
Censored.
with Dominic. At least I thought I was. My mind tried to ponder this, but then all thought ceased as the pleasure of Dominic reaching down between my legs and playing with my clit rendered me useless, and then a deep masculine voice that wasn't Dominic said from the shadows, "You've had your fun, Dominic, now it's my turn." Chapter 1. I remember it like it was yesterday. I walked excitedly into Mr. Cornwell's office, where the university was temporarily housing his private collection. I wanted to continue cataloging my finds, and instead of seeing Mr. Cornwell's short stature and weathered features, I saw a powerfully built man with his back turned to me wearing a trench coat, peering pensively at the Cornwell rare books collection that lined the wall directly to my right. Even though he was turned away from me, I could tell that he was larger than most men that I had encountered anywhere. I was an avid traveler, so had been most places in the world. I didn't say this to be boastful. It was just a fact. My parents were anthropologists and hadn't left my little brother or me to be raised by other family members or, as was popular in the neighborhoods I remembered as a child, nannies. Hence, my brother and I traveled with them across the world, learning different languages, immersing ourselves in diverse cultures. My brother and I ultimately chose different paths. He was a shiftless, unemployed gambler constantly in trouble. I didn't follow in our parents' footsteps either. I became a librarian, focused on preserving the rare collections and special discoveries of the local university where I was employed. This was also the reason I was currently in Mr. Cornwell's office, staring at a stranger. Mr. Cornwell, a good friend of the Chancellor, had made a generous gift to the university. The university gave me the exciting task of cataloging his sizable donation. I cleared my throat and said, "Excuse me, sir, but I'm looking for Mr. Cornwell. Have you seen him?" The man didn't turn around. He continued staring at the hard covers. His long, graceful fingers traced across their fragile spines reverently, almost as if caressing a lover. A shiver moved up my back, and immediately I looked around to see if there were a draft in the room, or if watching this man caress these books affected me in an intimate way. He didn't turn around to speak. He just continued his perusal of what I now considered my books. "Dad's around somewhere. If you see him, tell him that his son is waiting for him." "Would you?" I was surprised. This giant was Mr. Cornwell's son? "I'm Liza Matthews, the rare books cataloger from the university in charge of every aspect of the transfer of the material from your father's possession to our." "I know who you are, the attractive young librarian." He said this part matter-of-factly, and I was thankful that my olive complexion tanned well. With the summer heat my skin was a light brown, and so I was sure this man couldn't see the blush that had crept up my cheeks. "I'm sorry. I don't think we've met." "There was no reason to meet," he said, finally turning around to face me. What first caught my attention were his eyes. They were the color of rich, dark molasses, and then strangely enough my eyes fell to his lips. They were as full as my own, and showed no hint of a smile. The guy might have been handsome, but he was clearly not the friendliest person, as he kept his expression aloof and impassive. "Are you done looking at my mouth?" he said, and his lips curled up in a sardonic smile. I decided right then that I would have rather he maintain his unfriendly expression than that mocking smile that made me immediately uncomfortable. "Please tell your father that I stopped by." I found his boldness obnoxious, and I turned on my heel to leave, but the stranger stopped me. "Forgive me. I was rude. Can we start again?" He walked towards me. Something about the way he moved captured my attention. He was graceful in almost a predatory way. It seemed as if he were a predator stalking his prey, as he came to stop only inches from me. I'm Maximus Cornwell. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. You have a reputation of being one of the best in your field. He didn't extend his hand. He only looked down at me, with a curious expression in his dark eyes. I nervously licked my lips, very much aware of the heat that seemed to emanate from Maximus' body to overwhelm my own. His compliment flattered me. I was one of the best, but I was too modest to admit it aloud. I raised my hand and extended it to him. It's a pleasure to meet you, Maximus. And he surprised me by bringing my hand to his lips and
censored
the back of it. He held my eyes as he did so, the aloof expression replaced by a hint of
censored.
That triggered an instant physical response from me. I felt heat rush from the flesh that he
censored
and race up my arm. Goosebumps appeared on my skin, and he slowly brought my hand down but didn't let it go. I hesitated, and then pulled away from him. I immediately missed his warmth, and wondered if perhaps I had been in a
censored
drought too long since I reacted rather embarrassingly to this stranger's touch. I studied him again. He was so tall, I thought to myself for the second time, and his shoulders were massive as well. Under the trench coat, he had on a three-piece suit, which apparently was tailored to accommodate him since he was built like a professional athlete. I imagined he could walk out on a field any day and start playing football with no practice needed, yet he had the grace and sophistication of a man born into money. That was no surprise, given that his father was a very wealthy man, if not on the eccentric side. Very interesting rumors surrounded Mr. Cornwell, but surprisingly none had mentioned a son. Maximus took that moment to shrug out of his trench coat and placed it over his father's chair. He brought his hand up to push his jet-black locks away from his face, and I noticed how long his hair was. It seemed to reach down to just above his shoulders. He crossed his arms over his
censored
and stared at me appraising ly. I wasn't sure what he saw when he looked at me, but I know what I saw this morning when I looked in the mirror. A petite curvy brunette, a little heavy,
censored
with no interest in fashion. I pretty much wore sheath dresses and kitten heels every day, because it was easy, and I didn't have to think much. Pants were too much work. They had to be ironed or dry cleaned, and I never knew what top to wear with which pants. I simplified my life by just wearing dresses and low-heeled shoes. It worked for me. I always looked professional, and admittedly boring since a black dress and black shoes were my standard go-tos. So I stood there, fresh-faced, without makeup, and probably blushing as Maximus studied me. What? I said, raising my eyebrows, done feeling flustered by him. He raised his brows too. Is this the point where you become hostile? Is this the point where you stop attempting to be a brooding, mysterious stranger? I said back testily. He seemed surprised by my words, and then he smiled. I wish he hadn't done that. He was even sexier when he smiled. I admonished myself for thinking that, and tried to find a decent excuse to use in order to escape his gaze. Well, it was nice meeting you, Maximus. Tell your father. Tell me what, dear? Came Mr. Cornwell's voice from behind me, and I turned towards the older gentleman dressed in a suit as well and smiled. He was a sweet man and well-read, of course. I enjoyed his company, as he understood me better than most. I was just about to leave. I see you met my son, Mr. Cornwell said, moving over to his desk and shuffling around a few papers. Yes, I had the pleasure of meeting Maximus, I said, trying not to sound flippant, but I felt that I failed when Mr. Cornwell looked up at me with a tiny smile on his lips. Maximus, you weren't bothering Ms. Matthews, were you? Never, Dad. I was on my best behavior. Wasn't I, Liza? I liked the way my name rolled off his lips. He made it sound almost exotic, and it was then that I noticed his slight accent. I assumed he had been educated outside of the United States, but not in Europe. I would guess in Australia or somewhere else on that side of the world. I'm not sure what your best behavior looks like, Maximus, but I can guarantee that I didn't see it displayed earlier. I said, feeling the urge to rib him. Most people expected me to be shy and reserved, the stereotypical librarian, but I was anything but. Maximus' presence made me
censored.
tired, but I still had my share of caustic comments to throw at him. Well, I'll be sure he makes up for his behavior at lunch. Would you care to join us? I opened my mouth to say no, and then I saw Maximus' expression. He seemed amused, as if he expected me to say no, and almost as if he dared me not to. I heard myself saying yes instead. Great news, Maximus said with a small smile. I'm actually suddenly starving. Ravished. As he looked at me, I wondered if he were referring to
censored
for food or something else completely. Chapter 2. Mr. Cornwell surprised me by choosing a bar and grill for our lunch date. He told me he had a thing for American sports, so we sat close to a bar with several flat screens. When I saw the menu sporting such items as caviar, truffle French fries, and burgers that started at $50, I knew this wasn't your average pub food and understood why most of the clientele sported suits. We ordered, and our food arrived quickly. It smelled heavenly, and I happily dug in. I sat across from Maximus as Cornwell Sr. and I made meaningless chit-chat, mostly talking about our favorite books from the collection. At one point, he excused himself and left Maximus and me to our own devices. You young people talk. I'll be back, he said, moving to another table to greet a colleague. Without much to say, I concentrated my attention on pushing what little was left of my food around on my plate. Do I make you uncomfortable, Liza? I didn't bother to answer him and reached for my glass. I was still trying to become comfortable with his blunt manner of speaking. I took a sip of water, taking my time. He wasn't going to rush me into this conversation. What makes you think you make me uncomfortable? I said at last. You've barely said a word directly to me throughout our meal. I have things on my mind. Like what? A boyfriend? No. So you're not seeing anyone? That's none of your business. He placed his hands on the table, and I realized then how large they were, and he looked at me intently and said, You're right. It's none of my business, but I would like to make it my business. I would like to make you my business. I felt my cheeks turn red, and I avoided his meaningful gaze. Maybe I do have someone. Wouldn't matter if you do or not. It wouldn't be much of a deterrent, as far as I'm concerned. I looked at him and said, A deterrent from what? He smiled at me and said, Pursuing you. What makes you think I want to be pursued by you? He leaned back and his face was impassive as he said the next words. The way your pupils dilate when I get close to you, or the way you emanate heat just being in my presence. The way you're unable to take your eyes off my hands, as if you wonder what they would feel like on your body, touching you, caressing you. It could be the way you can't take your eyes off my lips, and you know you would like to feel them on you. His voice grew deeper as he said, Everywhere. I didn't know what to say. Was I that easy to read? He was so bold, so
censored,
and I wanted to tell him that he was wrong, that he didn't excite me, but that would be a lie. Am I wrong? He said as if bored, and he leaned back away from me, breaking the increasingly
censored,
heated moment. He then smiled in the direction of his father, who suddenly appeared at the table. Thank you for joining us for lunch, Liza. Hopefully my son wasn't too insufferable. I smiled at Mr. Cornwell shakily. No, thank you for inviting me. And I have to say, your son was actually very insufferable, so thank you for coming to my rescue. Mr. Cornwell chuckled, assuming that I was joking, and said, Isn't she a funny girl? Hilarious, Maximus said lightly, but his tone was distracted as he looked towards a large flat-screen television hanging over the restaurant's bar. I looked up at the television, thinking he was distracted by something related to sports, and realized that it was actually the news. There was something about a tiger sighting in the suburbs, and Maximus frowned deeply. Mr. Cornwell also seemed engrossed by the sensationalism. I said, It must have been someone's pet. That's a wealthy area of town. Many celebrities live there. Don't you live in that area, Mr. Cornwell? You know how certain celebrities own wild animals. I bet someone's pet got loose and was terrifying the neighbors. Be careful when you go home tonight. Mr. Cornwell glanced briefly in my direction and said with a gracious smile, You're probably right, my dear. There are so many eccentric people in my neck of the woods, but I think we'll be safe. He and Maximus then exchanged a look I didn't understand. I didn't dwell on it, and quickly forgot about it, as Mr. Cornwell promptly paid the check, and we walked back in the direction of the library. I had a meeting later that afternoon, and didn't want to waste too much time. I hadn't been able to prep for it the night before, so I was looking forward to doing the prep now. As we neared the building, I said, Mr. Cornwell, I will catch up with you later. I then turned to Maximus and nodded in acknowledgement of him. It was a pleasure meeting you, Maximus. The pleasure's all mine, he said softly, and the tone of his voice sounded actually genuine, as if he regretted that our time together was cut short. I tried not to read too much into it as I turned and walked quickly up the stairs, but part of me wanted to get one last look at him, so I glanced over my shoulder and saw him standing there, not really listening to his father who was talking animatedly. Maximus had his eyes trained on me as I climbed the stairs, and I held his gaze briefly. My heartbeat quickened, and I found myself growing warm before shaking my head at the power this stranger seemed to hold over me, before I broke eye contact and walked purposefully away. I listened to my boss drone on and on about budgets and the fiscal year, but I wasn't really listening. My mind was on my encounter with Maximus earlier. I had to get him out of my head, I thought to myself, as the meeting finally ended, and I was able to escape without making too much idle chit-chat with my coworkers. I loved my job, but I hated the meetings. I promptly headed to my car, and as I approached my little sedan, I saw Maximus standing there, leaning casually against it. What do you want, Maximus? I pretending he didn't excite my body just being near. You don't sound too happy to see me. Are you a stalker? I try not to be. He continued leaning against my car, making no sign of being ready to move. Before I could order him to go away, he said, I would like to get to know you better, Liza. Outside of work. Would you like that? He moved away from the car then, and came to stand in front of me. He reached up and trailed a hand down my cheek. The soft movement seemed almost intimate, and I wanted to rub my face against his hand. It's ridiculous how attractive I find you, when your manner is borderline offensive and fully obnoxious, I said instead. He was too shocked to say anything back, and I liked for once that I had startled him into not being able to speak. I nudged him out of the way, and unlocked my car while he just stood there, a pleased little smile on his face. I then got in behind the wheel, and he squatted down next to the door, looking at me through the window. I rolled it down and said, I might consider seeing you again. Maybe. What did you have in mind? He gave me a slow, broad smile, and I was reminded of how sexy he was again. You're so sassy. I think I might actually like it. How about we get together sometime this weekend? I pretended to think about it, before answering in the affirmative. Your father has my personal number, I'm sure. Give me a call. We'll make plans. Not waiting for him to move, I backed the car up and he jumped lithely out of the way. I smiled evilly to myself, honked the horn twice in goodbye and drove away. I couldn't resist the urge to look behind me, and I smiled to myself at the imposing perfection that was Maximus, as I completely disappeared from view. Chapter 3. Lady Belle. Come down from there right now. I'm serious. Right now. I hissed at my cat that was up in a tree in front of my home, leisurely licking her paws, as if she didn't have a care in the world. I looked around me, hoping that I wasn't waking the neighbors. I didn't see anyone, so I fastened my robe tighter to my body, and then giving one last look over my shoulder, I shimmied up the tree. It took a few bad starts, but 5 minutes later, I was hanging from a larger branch that stuck out to the right of the tree, reaching for my cat Lady Belle, who was obviously anything but a lady, I thought somewhat bitterly. She made no move to make it easier for me, and instead just rolled over on her back, exposing her belly, situated precariously on the edge of a large limb. "No. I'm not going to rub your tummy. Come here. Come here, sweetie." I beckoned her. She blatantly ignored me, and then made a move to jump down. I figured I would be able to stop her, so I also pivoted forward, and then promptly swiped her into my arms. It wasn't until I was falling through the air that I realized I had overcorrected, and a scream tore from my throat as I tumbled towards the ground. I abruptly stopped screaming when I landed with a thump in the arms of a man I had seen before from a distance. Even from a distance, I figured he would be attractive, but I hadn't been expecting this. Up close, his eyes were light blue, almost gray, and he smiled at the bemused look on my face. "Thank you," I said, trying to maintain some dignity as I adjusted my robe and attempted to stand up. I had accidentally flashed him, since I wasn't wearing a bra beneath it, and he was gentlemanly enough to pretend not to notice. I briefly thought how Maximus would have most likely gone out of his way to comment upon seeing my
censored.
This man, though, only eased me down, and I did my best to fix my disheveled clothing with a frisky cat still in my hand. "I'm a cat person, clearly," I said to ease my embarrassment. "No kidding? A woman after my own heart," he said softly, and I realized that as he stepped out of the shadows into the streetlight, he was wearing jogging shorts, running shoes, and nothing else. He was all lean muscle and smooth, lightly tanned skin. He placed his hands on his hips. I practically salivated as the small motion made his pecs flex, and I could see every detail of his chiseled, perfect abs. The guy was built like a deity. I couldn't believe my luck. 2 sexy men all in the same week? I felt suddenly shy around him, given that he was so scarcely dressed. He didn't seem to be in a rush to go anywhere, so I awkwardly said, "I'm sorry to disturb your jog." "Run. Your workout." He shrugged and gave me a boyish smile. "No big deal. I like to help damsels in distress. My name's Dominic, by the way. You're new to the neighborhood too, right?" I nodded. "I'm Liza. I've only lived here for a few months." "You live near Patterson Street, right? I thought I recognized you." He nodded. "I'm having a housewarming party, by the way. Just a few friends. You should stop by if you're not too busy." The offer surprised me. I assumed my current state of undress might have had something to do with it. "Interested," I said. "When is it?" "This weekend. Saturday night." I thought briefly about Maximus, and wondered if he actually planned to call anytime soon. I then told myself that I was being ridiculous. I could accept an invitation with another man. It wasn't as if I was dating Maximus. He hadn't even called, and it had been a few days since I had seen him in his father's office. "I'll try to make it," I said in a non-committal tone, and he looked disappointed. "Come on, say yes," and there was something about the beckoning yet teasing tone of his voice that made me want to give in. He wasn't as intense as Maximus. I could tell that instantly from the warmth of his voice and his open expression, but something about him was just as enthralling and demanded my attention. His blue eyes slowly searched my own, being reminded again of how different he was from Maximus. I knew Dominic was tempted to let his eyes travel over my body, but he resisted out of politeness, while Maximus didn't care at all, obviously, about propriety. "You're a very beautiful woman, Liza," he said suddenly, and I blinked, not expecting the compliment. "Thank you," I mumbled, and his pupils seemed to dilate a little bit. I assumed it was my eyes playing tricks on me. I ignored it. The man was gorgeous with his short-cut hair and muscular shoulders. He looked like he belonged in the military, or on the cover of a men's fitness magazine. Everything about him seemed to be a study in perfection, and his eyes were his crowning glory, a stunning shade of blue that seemed to alternate between blue and gray as they surveyed me. "Well, it was a pleasure meeting you, Liza. Maybe we'll run into each other again." And with that, he teasingly saluted me, and went back either to continue his jog or return home. I called out, "Be safe," and realized he was gone. The man was seriously fast, and clearly in great shape. I didn't hear from Maximus at all, and we didn't run into each other as I thought we would when I went to the office. When Saturday night approached, I got dressed to attend Dominic's party. I wasn't so thrilled to be going, but I didn't want to sit around all Saturday night wishing I were doing something besides watching old movies streamed on my computer. I'd had enough weekends sitting on the couch just talking to Lady Belle, and I was starting to feel like our one-sided conversations weren't the best use of my free time. I slipped on a maxi dress and let my long hair fall in soft waves that trailed down my back. I grabbed the gift card I had gotten Dominic for his housewarming gift and headed out. It wasn't quite dark yet. It seemed like the sun would be setting in a few hours. I arrived at Dominic's door, rang the doorbell, and felt suddenly nervous being there. I didn't know him at all, and now I was going to hang out with him and his friends. What if he was an obnoxious joker? Then what? I guess I could make an excuse about my cat being in the tree again, and sneak away, I thought pitifully to myself. The door opened a second later, and I scratched all ideas of running off to go sit on the couch with my cat when I saw Dominic standing there. He was wearing a fitted white t-shirt and dark jeans. He managed to look debonair and casual all at the same time, and then he smiled at me as if he truly were happy that I was there. "Liza, you made it. Come on in," he said, surprising me by ushering me in by placing his hand on my lower back. It felt good there, especially since part of my dress was backless. His hand lingered on my exposed skin, just long enough to be a tad inappropriate, and I was sorry when he moved his hand away and started pointing at the various guests there. It was a full crowd, and he jokingly gestured towards one group sitting next to his fireplace and said, "Those are the nerds. Stay away from them. They're talking about quantum physics and fiscal policy. Pretty boring subjects." He then rotated me to the left and pointed out a group of people that were really animated and laughing. I thought I heard the words, "Aliens and Star Wars" at one point from them. "Those are my friends that I only allow over if they pay me," he said, and I had to laugh. "Are they really that bad?" Dominic grimaced as if it pained him to admit it, and I immediately loved his teasing personality. "Yes, they're really that bad. Right now they're talking about Tesla, government conspiracy theories, sci-fi movies, and who had the most acne back in high school. So far everyone agrees that it was me." I laughed. "Well, you couldn't tell, your complexion's beautiful now." He smiled down at me. "Beautiful, huh? A woman before has never called me beautiful. I don't know if I should feel emasculated or flattered. Either way, I might just have to keep you." "Trust me. You don't want that," came a voice from behind us. An older woman, around 50 with startling blue eyes and a soft smile on her face, approached us and extended her hand. "I'm Patty, Dominic's mother, and you must be the cute neighbor he mentioned inviting." I blushed. "I certainly hope so." "Well, enjoy the party, and tell me if my son gets out of hand." She then walked away and started socializing with another woman her age. "I never get out of hand," he said to me, and then he leaned down so that his mouth was very close to my ear. "I mean, unless you want me to." There was so much meaning behind his words, not to mention the way he looked at me as he pulled away, that I knew his version of out of hand most likely wasn't rated PG. I would guess it was more along the lines of North Carolina 17 or XXX. "Hey everybody," he shouted suddenly over the crowd. "This is my friend Liza." Everyone stopped whatever they were doing, and I received a ton of random greetings. "Hi Liza. Nice to meet you. Welcome to the party, sexy. That's Alan, ignore him. He doesn't get out much," Dominic said jokingly, referring to the tall and lanky guy standing next to the drinks who had made the sexy comment. Alan heard him and said, "He's not lying. I don't get out at all." He then winked at me and walked off. "Your friends are funny," I said, starting to relax. "They're okay, I guess. When they're not eating all my food or drinking all my beer. Speaking of which, what would you like to drink?" "I don't know. Soda maybe?" "You sure?" "Yeah, just to start. I didn't like to drink around those I didn't know. It was a control and image thing." I felt alcohol made me a little loose, and I hated to be out of control. Soda it is. He disappeared for a second and came back with a drink. Thank you. He again allowed his hand to rest on my lower back as he started to introduce me personally to various people. I found them interesting as a whole, and it seemed a lot of them worked in science and technology. It was a mixed group of friends and family, but I noticed when people talked about Dominic it was clear how much they respected him, and how easygoing he was when chided. It was nice to be around someone who didn't take himself too seriously. As the night grew later, I gave a big yawn while talking to Alan and he said, "Am I boring you?" I shook my head embarrassed and then he yawned as well. "Oh no, it's contagious." I had to laugh, and then Dominic appeared and Alan excused himself. "Are you having a good time?" "A great time." "I caught you yawning. Tell the truth." He said this while trailing his hand down my arm. The simple motion served to turn me on. "Maybe I'm just a little tired," I confessed, leaning in closer to him, wanting him to touch me again. He brought his hand up and ran it through my hair and down my cheek. "I can walk you home." "No way. I'm not ready to go home yet." "Then maybe you'll consider sitting outside with me. Come check out the backyard. I have a breathtaking view of the mountains from there." "Lead the way," I said enthusiastically. He was right. His view was stunning. Not only that, but he had a swimming pool, an infinity pool that sat in the middle of his perfectly landscaped backyard. I noted that the whole house had been a study in understated elegance, and the backyard continued that theme with the stunning outdoor kitchen and patio area. He sat down and patted a seat next to him. "I've wanted to steal you away all evening." "Really?" I said, faking surprise as I sat down next to him. I was aware of his thigh pressing against mine, and the scent of his aftershave. I wanted to curl up in his lap and do things to him that I probably shouldn't have been thinking about. "No. I'm lying." I looked up at him startled and saw that he was looking down at me with a smile. I smiled back and went to say something in return when he brought his arm around my waist and pulled me closer. "I've actually wanted to
censored
you all evening. Do you mind?" I pretended to think about it. As I went to say yes, his lips closed over mine. He didn't bother to wait for an answer. The
censored
was warm and so were his hands as they worked their way up and down my exposed spine. He let his hands go briefly under the little bit of cloth that was there. He stroked my skin and I shifted a little, trying to allow him more access. He reached into my dress and ran his hands along the waistband of my panties. I thought I should pull away, but I didn't. Instead, I wrapped my arms around his neck and when he abandoned my mouth to place
censored
up and down my neck, I let him. When he brought his hands up to palm my
censored
through the fabric, I wanted him to be closer. I wanted to feel his skin against mine, but our clothes were unfortunately in the way. I said in between sighs, "Maybe we should stop because of your guests." "Do you want me to stop?" "No." He surprised me by pulling away suddenly and picking me up instead. "Let's go somewhere more private." I nodded, liking the idea. He carried me a few feet to a door I hadn't noticed before. It seemed to be a small changing room for the pool area, or a guest room situated right off his backyard. He placed me on the small bed there and stepped back. I could see the moonlight peeking through the shades that covered the windows, as Dominic stripped down to nothing, his strong virile body on full display. I watched, growing wetter each second as he walked over to where I sat on the bed, holding myself up by my elbows.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
Chapter 4. "Hi cutie," Dominic said standing up to
censored
me on my cheek. He looked so sexy wearing cargo pants and a blue shirt that matched the color of his eyes. Several of the women in the restaurant had stopped to look. He really was that handsome now that I could see him in the light of day. "Hi," I said, feeling suddenly shy around him now that we were seeing each other again after our impromptu
censored
romp. He noticed it and said, "Is there any way to make this any more awkward for you?" I had to laugh. Let's just get this out of the way. I really enjoyed your party, especially the after party next to the pool. And I enjoyed getting to know your body thoroughly, and I would like to get to know you and your body better. I think that could be arranged. We enjoyed banter that is more playful, and then we started to discuss what I considered quintessential first date topics: career, family, likes and dislikes. It turns out that Dominic was previously in the military and had started his own security company that catered to executives overseas, and apparently he enjoyed his work, as his face lit up as he talked about it. It turned out that some of the people I had met the other night were not only his friends, but also his co-workers, as most of Dominic's operations took place in the digital world. He seemed very interested in my job and asked a lot of questions about my favorite collections and rarest finds. I had no problem answering and felt myself opening up to him. He was a great listener and a natural conversationalist. I was so engrossed in our conversation that I didn't notice we had company until Dominic looked up and said, "Can I help you?" I looked up as well, and was surprised to see Maximus standing at our table. He was dressed impeccably in another three-piece suit. He looked slightly annoyed by Dominic's presence, but showed no signs of jealousy. In fact, he outright ignored Dominic and instead spoke to me. "I didn't expect to see you here. Having a little lunch date with your friend?" "She sure is." "Is that a problem?" Dominic said, stopping me from answering. "I was talking to Liza, not to you," he said to Dominic coldly, and then turned back to me. "Are you not allowed to answer questions on your own anymore?" Dominic started to stand up, and I grabbed his hand to prevent him from exacerbating the already tense situation. Were two guys really about to fight over me? "Dominic, this is Maximus." "Maximus, this is Dominic." Maximus didn't say another word to Dominic. "I have additions to the collection that I would like to discuss with you. Contact me when you're done playing with your boy toy here." He then left without another word. Dominic's jaw began to twitch. He was gritting his teeth so hard. "Who's that? An ex-boyfriend?" "Not even. He's my newest client's son. Seems like a real ass." I stopped him before he could continue. "Yes, he can be, but then again, I just met him last week. So who really knows? Anyway, I'm sorry for that. Want to talk about something else?" He visibly relaxed, and we chatted a little more before I had to get back. He
censored
my cheek, and I promised to call him later. As I headed to my office, I saw a limo outside the university's library. I figured that Mr. Cornwell or Maximus was there. When I walked into the building, Maximus was sitting there chatting with the department secretary at her desk outside my office. She seemed flattered by his attention and was giggling like a schoolgirl as she spoke to him. I rolled my eyes and Maximus winked at me. "Oh? Ms. Matthews, Mr. Cornwell is here to see you." "Thanks, Kim, I noticed," I said with a smile in my voice. "Come in, Maximus." I was more amused by him than anything else. "So what is it about Dominic that you like?" Maximus said, as he closed my office door behind him without bothering to ask my permission first. "I'm not sure why I expected anything less. I thought you wanted to see me about the collection." "The collection can wait. So what is it about him that you like?" "You didn't answer the question." He sat down in the chair across from me, and I couldn't help but notice how he had an air of royalty about him. "We only just met. I like that he's funny and easygoing and sexy." "I'm sexy," Maximus said matter-of-factly, with a small smile forming on his face. "I noticed that you left out funny and easygoing. I'm a man, not a puppy. If you want fun and easygoing, maybe you should get a Labrador." "You're being obnoxious." "I'm being honest." He then suddenly got up and came around the desk where I was sitting and sat down on it. "Get off my desk," I said, poking at him. He grabbed my hand and said, "If you give me 10 minutes, I'll make you forget all about Danny Boy." Dominic? His name is Dominic. I tried to pull my hand away, and instead, with barely any effort, he pulled me from my chair and I was in his arms. 10 minutes, he said against my lips. He
censored
me hard on the mouth and said, "Time starts now." He punctuated each word with a
censored,
and then he led me to the small couch situated near a window in my office. 5 minutes, and maybe we should do this somewhere else. My secretary's right outside. I know. Maybe she'll walk in and join us. Maximus?
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
He stood up and didn't say anything more. I let my gaze drift down his body, and noticed that he was hard, his member pressing against his slim-fitting pants. He followed the direction of my gaze and smiled, maybe later. Then he left my office, leaving the door open, calling goodbye to my secretary. Chapter 5. Maximus didn't mention anything about seeing me outside of work, and I figured he got what he wanted that day in my office. Hence, I was surprised a week later when around midnight my phone rang, and I blindly reached over and answered it. "Hello?" I said sleepily. "Are you with him?" said the dark voice on the phone that I instantly recognized as Maximus. "With whom?" I was still groggy, and my mind couldn't keep up. "With Dominic." I looked over at Dominic's sleeping form, and drew the sheet back as I climbed out of bed, and went off in search of a place far enough from Dominic that I could yell at Maximus for calling me so late. I walked into my guest bedroom and closed the door. "What does it matter, Maximus? You and I aren't an item. You don't get to tell me whom I can or cannot see. It's 12 o'clock in the morning." There was silence. "I'm coming over." "Maximus, no? Don't be silly." I also added, feeling guilty for no real reason, "Dominic's here." Again Maximus grew quiet, and then he said words that served to both shock and arouse me.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
I couldn't answer. I was too busy coming, and as my breathing went back to normal, I closed my legs and sighed into the phone sleepily, but became immediately wide awake as Maximus said, "I'll be there in 10 minutes. The line disconnected. I knew he was serious, so I rolled out of the guest bed and looked for my clothes. Dominic didn't wake up, and I crept back out of my room and then through the door. It was after 2 o'clock in the morning. Our neighborhood was safe, but crazy things could happen anywhere, but there was no way I was going to let Maximus in. We would just have to face off on the front porch, and I just hoped Dominic wouldn't hear us. Chapter 6. As I stood there waiting for Maximus, I heard a sound in the shrubs to my left. It almost sounded as if someone were breathing. I quickly took a step back, startled enough to try to get away from the noise, but clumsily I forgot that the stairs to my porch dropped off abruptly, and so I went down hard and felt pain reverberate across my body as my back hit the hard ground. My heart rate raced, and I opened my mouth to scream when a hand gripped me around the ankle and pulled me towards the shrubs. I kicked and fought, screaming the whole time, and I heard my would-be assailant scream suddenly, and saw Lady Belle clawing at his face. He slapped her away, and she landed with a sickening thud on the bottom step. "I hate cats," the man growled, stepping out of the shadows. He was short and heavily muscular, like a boxer, and he radiated a stench from the sweat that pooled under his arms and across his wide.
Censored.
I backed up, still on all fours, attempting to shake his grip on my leg as Lady Belle again went in for the attack. He kicked at her, and ignored her clawing at his leg as he easily disregarded her, and reached down towards my shaking form. "Your brother owes us a debt, and we intend to collect," was all he said as he attempted to grab me by my shirt to keep me from struggling. I knew my brother had been in some trouble from his gambling, but I would have never expected this. As he leaned down, I kicked out with all my might and caught him on the chin. I attempted to run up my steps, but he grabbed me and threw me down to the ground. I jumped up and ran, winded but not giving up. I caught a glimpse of Lady Belle launching herself at his face, and they tussled on the ground. I wasn't looking where I was going, too busy looking back at the damage Lady Belle was fortunately causing, and I ran into a rock hard.
Censored.
Maximus. What's? He didn't get any additional words out as he saw the man now coming towards us with a gun in his hand. I'll kill you both, but I just want the girl. That's not going to happen, Maximus said quietly, and I screamed and stepped back as his face began to blur, to shift, and to change. It was a horrific sight to see, as his features distorted and his skin seemed to peel back. I stood there frozen in place with horror, and I caught sight of Dominic now on the front porch looking in our direction. He saw what was going on and leapt gracefully off the porch. Then to my horror, his face began to blur too. I figured I was going crazy as I backed up, and then I heard a growl as Maximus was now gone, but in his place was a large tiger with eyes the color of dark molasses. I screamed and stumbled back, but the tiger wasn't interested in me, as it jumped into the air and I heard the thug sputter and then fire 2 shots at the creature. I was so frightened that I didn't see where Dominic had gone. I screamed when the tiger flying in the air didn't get his prey. Instead, the thug was tackled from behind by another tiger, and I knew then that I was going insane. Where were these tigers coming from, besides my imagination? This other tiger was pure white, an albino tiger it seemed, and he mercilessly went for the screaming man's jugular, tearing it out. I screamed and attempted to jump up, afraid for my life, but fear froze my limbs as the tigers simultaneously looked back at me and then sized up each other. The albino tiger titled its head and growled, and the other tiger just stared back, its eyes steady, dangerous. I motioned to stand up, afraid they would hear me and come after me, when the albino tiger again looked in my direction, and the other tiger used that moment to spring on him. I got up and backed away slowly as they fought, growling and roaring. It was then that I saw the gun had landed close to me, and I raised my hand, reached for it, unsure which one to shoot. On shaky legs I stood up and pointed, but promptly my hand lowered. I couldn't shoot them, something was stopping me. The tigers seemed to sense my earlier intentions and turned their attention back to me, but instead of coming towards me, they began to morph, changing shape in front of me. The tiger's skin began to stretch, and instead of fur, there was sinewy muscle, human muscle, and as their snouts began to form into human features, the white tiger became Dominic, and the other tiger with the dark molasses eyes became Maximus. They approached me slowly,
Censored,
and impassive expressions on both their faces. Drop the gun, Liza, or at the very least, point it towards Dominic, Maximus said. I'm just glad you're all right, Dominic said, stepping closer to me. Stop scaring her, Maximus. I wasn't the one who ripped out a jugular in front of her. By the way, you need to get rid of the body one way or another, and I'm not particularly hungry, Maximus said matter-of-factly. With those words, I decided then to run. Dominic caught me easily, and I started to scream as his arms came around me. He covered my mouth and said, I'm sorry, Liza, but we can't wake the neighbors. I could hear sirens as he dragged me back towards my house, and Maximus sighed heavily and picked up the thug's body. Dominic carried me kicking and screaming towards my bedroom. Maximus disappeared into my kitchen with the thug's body in tow. Dominic dropped me down on my bed and didn't bother to close the door behind us. I was breathing heavily, afraid to move, looking at the open door. What are you? A shifter. What? A shifter. You collect books. You must have read about my kind. This is crazy. I would guess so for you. I just stared at him, wondering when I would wake up. This had to be a dream or nightmare. My kind can shift between animal form and human form. Is that really so hard to believe, given what you just saw? But there were 2 of you, my voice trailed off. I couldn't believe I was entertaining this conversation. Yes, Maximus was an unexpected, unwanted surprise. I knew there was a reason I hated him instantly, besides him being obnoxious. He sat down next to me, and I instantly backed up. You just killed a man, I said. Only because he was going to kill you. Did you want me to give him the opportunity to do so? I saw an immediate threat, and I eliminated it. I imagined this was simply a result of his military training, but even as my mind accepted that, I still had to fight back the nausea that clawed at me. He had a valid point, and I felt my body shaking from the adrenaline. He cautiously reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. His presence calmed me more than it frightened me. I didn't know why. He gradually brought me in his arms and said, "I'm just happy that you're okay." It must have been the adrenaline or the need to do something primal that reaffirmed life, because I found myself running my hands over his still nude body. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked cautiously. "Very sure," I said against his lips. I reached up and switched off the light.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
Thank you for reading my book. If you like this story, I think you'll enjoy my Bookshift Quickie. A big favor to ask. I would really love it if you could take a few seconds to leave me a review. Thank you so much in advance. About the author. Selina Coffey is a romance writer who lives happily in London with her husband and son. She is a hopeless romantic who grew up always believing in love, and she is not ashamed to admit this. It is this belief that makes her so passionate about writing crazy love stories. A stereotypical girly girl, she loves shopping. So whenever she gets a chance and the spare cash, you will probably find her browsing online for the next pair of shoes to add to her collection. You can find her online at www.selinacoffey.com. Contact her at hello@selinacoffey.com. Closing credits. This has been Double Pawsome. Written by Selina Coffey. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Copyright 2024 by Lovie Books Limited. Production copyright 2024 by Lovie Books Limited.